Picture this. You're wearing a dress so massive, it takes up an entire doorway, with layers upon layers of fabric, steel hoops, and enough material to make a circus tent. Now imagine you desperately need to use the bathroom. How on earth would you manage? This was the daily reality for millions of Victorian women who spent their lives trapped inside architectural marvels of fabric and steel. The answer to this intimate mystery reveals one of history's most ingenious and shocking solutions, one that will completely change how you think about Victorian society forever. Before we dive into the most private secrets of the Victorian era, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon, because what you're about to learn will blow your mind and probably make you grateful for modern fashion. Lady Catherine Pemberton stood before her mirror each morning, preparing for what could only be described as a complex engineering project. Getting dressed wasn't simply putting on clothes. It was constructing a portable architecture around her body. The process began at dawn and required the assistance of at least 2 servants, an hour of careful planning, and the structural integrity of a small building. Victorian women didn't just wear dresses. They wore entire ecosystems of undergarments. The foundation started with a chemise, a thin cotton layer that protected the skin from the harsh materials above. Next came the corset, laced so tightly it could reduce a woman's waist by up to 6 inches, literally reshaping her internal organs. But the real challenge was the crinoline, a cage-like structure made of steel hoops that could extend up to 6 feet in diameter. These crinolines weren't just fashion statements. They were social requirements. A respectable Victorian lady's dress had to maintain a perfect bell shape, and the only way to achieve this was through an elaborate framework of steel rings connected by fabric tapes. The largest crinolines used over 100 yards of steel wire and weighed up to 20 pounds, before adding the dress itself. The dress that went over this foundation was equally impressive in its complexity. Multiple layers of petticoats, an overskirt, an underskirt, and decorative trim created a garment that could weigh another 15 to 20 pounds. The total ensemble often exceeded 40 pounds, and made simple tasks like walking through doorways a calculated maneuver. But here's where the story gets fascinating. Victorian society was so obsessed with modesty that they created the most impractical clothing system in human history. Women couldn't bend at the waist, couldn't sit in normal chairs, and certainly couldn't perform basic bodily functions without a complex strategy. The irony is striking. In their quest to hide the human body, they created garments that made being human incredibly difficult. The engineering marvel of Victorian dress extended beyond mere appearance. Each layer served multiple purposes. The corset provided support for the heavy outer layers. The crinoline created the required silhouette while allowing air circulation, and the multiple petticoats provided warmth and additional shape. It was a carefully calibrated system where removing or adjusting any single component could cause the entire structure to collapse. Women of different social classes wore variations of this system. Working-class women might have smaller crinolines and fewer layers, but they still followed the same basic architectural principles. Even young girls began wearing simplified versions of these contraptions, training their bodies from childhood to accommodate the demands of fashionable dress. The psychological impact was profound. Women learned to move differently, think differently, and plan their entire day around the limitations of their clothing. Simple activities like using the stairs, entering a carriage, or attending a dinner party required careful consideration and strategic planning. This wasn't just fashion. It was a complete lifestyle built around the requirements of elaborate dress. Margaret Thornfield, faced her daily nemesis, the call of nature while wearing 40 pounds of fabric and steel. For modern women, answering this basic human need takes mere minutes. For a Victorian lady, it was a logistical nightmare that required planning, assistance, and sometimes desperate creativity. The primary challenge wasn't just the size of the dress, it was the layering system. Underneath that magnificent bell-shaped skirt were multiple barriers. Drawers, split-crotch undergarments, chemise, multiple petticoats, and the rigid crinoline cage. Each layer had to be navigated carefully to avoid damaging the delicate steel framework or tangling the extensive fabric. Victorian drawers were ingeniously designed, with an open seam running from front to back, allowing women to relieve themselves without completely removing their undergarments. This split-crotch design was considered highly practical, though it required a specific technique to use effectively. Women had to carefully gather and hold multiple layers of fabric while maintaining their balance, no small feat when wearing a dress that could tip over furniture. The process typically required assistance. Wealthy women employed ladies' maids specifically trained in the art of dress management. These servants would help gather the outer layers, ensure the crinoline was properly positioned, and sometimes even hold certain garments in place. For women without servants, the process became a solitary struggle that could take up to 15 minutes to complete safely. Public facilities were virtually non-existent for women during this era, making the bathroom dilemma even more complex when away from home. Victorian ladies developed several coping strategies, limiting fluid intake before social events, carefully timing their outings, and learning to identify houses with the most accommodating facilities. The chamber pot became an essential bedroom furniture piece, not just for nighttime use, but for emergency situations when the full dress dismantling process wasn't feasible. Some innovative women kept portable options hidden within their voluminous skirts, small vessels that could be discreetly accessed without major wardrobe adjustments. Indoor plumbing, when available, presented its own challenges. Victorian toilets were often designed without considering the space requirements of enormous skirts. Women had to master the art of bunching, folding, and positioning their crinolines to avoid contact with unsanitary surfaces while maintaining enough stability to avoid falling. The psychological impact was significant. Women developed what modern psychologists might recognize as bathroom anxiety. The complexity of the process, the potential for embarrassing accidents, and the time required created genuine stress around basic bodily functions. Many women's diaries from the period mention the relief felt when undressing for bed and the dread of facing the morning's elaborate redressing process. Weather conditions added another layer of complexity. Rain could soak the outer layers, making them heavier and more difficult to manage. Wind could turn a crinoline into a dangerous sail, potentially exposing ankles or, worse, undergarments, a scandal that could ruin a woman's reputation. The social implications were far-reaching. Women often arranged their social schedules around their clothing limitations, avoiding certain events or locations known to have inadequate facilities. The simple act of using the bathroom became a class distinction. Wealthy women had better solutions, while working-class women often suffered in silence with inadequate arrangements. Victorian ingenuity reached its peak when it came to solving the intimate challenges of elaborate dress. Women, servants, and even inventors developed an entire arsenal of secret techniques, specialized tools, and ingenious workarounds that allowed them to maintain both their dignity and their biological needs. The most revolutionary solution was the lifting technique, passed down from mother to daughter like a closely guarded family secret. Experienced Victorian women learned to create a systematic method for gathering their skirts. They would start by grasping the outer dress at specific points, then work inward through each layer, creating organized bundles that could be held in place with one hand while the other remained free for balance and adjustment. Professional ladies' maids developed their own specialized skills, becoming experts in what was essentially dress architecture. The most skilled maids could perform the tent method, creating a private, enclosed space by arranging the outer skirt layers like a tent around the woman's lower body. This technique provided privacy and kept the expensive outer fabrics clean while allowing access to the functional undergarments. Inventors of the era, recognizing a market opportunity, created specialized bathroom accessories. The ladies' convenience chair became popular among the wealthy, a specially designed seat with an opening that accommodated voluminous skirts while providing support and stability. These chairs often featured adjustable components and were sometimes disguised as regular furniture to maintain Victorian modesty standards. The fashion industry responded with subtle but crucial design modifications. Dressmakers began incorporating hidden ties and strategic openings in dress construction. Some gowns featured concealed panels or adjustable sections that could be temporarily loosened. The most expensive dresses included what were discreetly called practical considerations, design elements that made the bathroom process more manageable without compromising the dress's appearance. Wealthy families invested in specialized bathroom architecture. Some Victorian mansions featured ladies' retiring rooms with extra-wide doorways, reinforced toilet seats, and grab bars positioned at strategic heights. These rooms often included full-length mirrors and servant call buttons, recognizing that dress management was a two-person operation. The most closely guarded secrets involved emergency techniques for public situations. Victorian women developed a code of mutual assistance, silently helping each other manage dress emergencies at social events. They learned to identify potential allies among other women and developed discreet signals for requesting help. Some of the most innovative solutions came from working-class women who couldn't afford servants. They created ingenious home modifications, hooks and pulley systems in their bedrooms, specialized chamber pots with extended rims, and even rope and weight systems that could help manage heavy skirts single-handedly. The medical community eventually acknowledged the health implications of these elaborate garments. Progressive doctors began recommending specific exercises to strengthen the muscles needed for daily dress management and advocated for design reforms that would make basic human functions more manageable. Perhaps most remarkably, Victorian women developed an entire social etiquette around these intimate challenges. They created acceptable explanations for lengthy absences, established discreet ways to request assistance, and maintained the fiction that none of these elaborate procedures were necessary, all while desperately sharing practical solutions in private conversations. The psychological adaptation was extraordinary. Women learned to plan their entire day around clothing limitations, developed remarkable balance and coordination skills, and created support networks focused on managing the practical challenges of fashionable dress. Behind the glamorous facade of Victorian fashion lurked a hidden health crisis that polite society refused to acknowledge. The elaborate dress system that defined feminine respectability was slowly poisoning, deforming, and sometimes killing the women who wore it. And the bathroom dilemma was just the tip of a very dangerous iceberg. Dr. Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, one of the few female physicians of the era, documented alarming trends in her female patients. Women were developing chronic urinary tract infections at unprecedented rates, directly linked to their reluctance to undress frequently enough for proper hygiene. The complex bathroom process meant many women deliberately dehydrated themselves, leading to kidney problems and other serious health complications. The tight corsets, essential for supporting the heavy dress layers, were literally reshaping women's internal organs. Compressed rib cages pushed vital organs downward and inward, affecting digestion, breathing, and circulation. Many women experienced chronic constipation, not just from dietary restrictions, but from the physical impossibility of proper elimination while wearing their elaborate costumes. Pregnancy became a dangerous masquerade. Victorian social expectations demanded that pregnant women continue wearing corseted, layered clothing that concealed their condition, often endangering both mother and child. The bathroom challenges intensified during pregnancy, when women needed more frequent relief, but faced even greater difficulty managing their increasingly cumbersome garments. The psychological toll was equally severe. Women developed what modern medicine would recognize as anxiety disorders related to their clothing. Fear of public embarrassment, the constant stress of managing elaborate garments, and the social pressure to appear effortlessly elegant created mental health challenges that went completely unrecognized and untreated. Yet this crisis sparked the first whispers of fashion revolution. Progressive women began meeting in private to discuss alternatives. The dress reform movement, though initially small and heavily criticized, gained momentum as women shared their experiences and realized they weren't alone in their suffering. Reform advocates like Dr. Mary Walker and activist Frances Willard began publicly challenging the health implications of fashionable dress. They documented case studies, gathered medical evidence, and slowly began to shift public opinion. The rational dress movement proposed shocking alternatives: simpler skirts, looser corsets, and, most scandalously, clothing that prioritized function over fashion. The economic implications were staggering. The elaborate Victorian dress system supported entire industries: corset makers, crinoline manufacturers, specialized servants, and clothing designers. Fashion reform threatened thousands of jobs and millions of dollars in established business practices. Working-class women, out of economic necessity, began adapting their clothing for practicality. Factory workers, domestic servants, and laborers started wearing simplified versions of fashionable dress, modifications that gradually influenced middle-class fashion choices. The bathroom crisis became a catalyst for broader social change. Women who had been forced to discuss intimate physical needs began talking about other restrictions in their lives. The practical challenges of elaborate dress became metaphors for larger questions about women's roles, rights, and freedoms. By the 1890s, the rigid dress codes were beginning to crack. Bicycle riding, sports participation, and professional work demanded more practical clothing. The bathroom dilemma that had seemed unsolvable for decades suddenly had simple solutions, if society was willing to accept them. The Victorian dress system finally collapsed not because of fashion trends or social pressure, but because women refused to continue sacrificing their health, comfort, and dignity for the sake of appearance. The next time you effortlessly use a modern bathroom, remember the millions of Victorian women who turned a basic human need into an engineering challenge. If this incredible story amazed you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more fascinating historical mysteries, and hit that notification bell, because history's most shocking secrets are just getting started. What other simple activities do you think were complicated by historical fashion? Let us know in the comments below.